Chapter 6: Healing Sacred Wounds and Trauma. You can no longer live on the outskirts of your highest timeline. You can no longer sit in the back rows of your own life. You can no longer shrink to fit in with those that are content to stay small. You can no longer be defined by that which makes you suffer when you also hold the cure. Lisa, Pleiadian Metasoul Sister. To heal our fear is why we are here. Jelelle. Dropping into the emotive ground of our being, really feeling what we are feeling, is like a crawling, a purging, a beyond the mind letting go into pure emotion. This emotive ground offers so many riches when you finally allow yourself to walk on it. Here, you harvest the awakenings offered by the experience of those traumas moving. Here, you harvest the gifts that happen when the heart gets broken open. Diversions and sometimes necessary bypasses are created by your vigilant inner protector to keep you away from here. There is the taking of things such as anti-feeling drugs, careers and jobs, busyness, relationships in so many forms that will effectively numb and blind. What wants to bubble up, though, always will. And even the inner protector then feels the calling of this blessed release into feeling. Your essence arises from the rich, fertile soil of this emotive ground, watered by the tears that are finally shed, fertilized by your willingness to be vulnerable. Compassion and forgiveness provide the necessary rays of sunshine to help this feeling garden grow. This emotive ground of being is discovered through the inner negotiations with parts of you like the inner protector, who stands at that gate guarding, holding the hands of your precious inner child and inner teenager. You show up to feel and to be real. You look around and see through eyes without judgment what lurks in the shadows there, inviting it to come out and be embraced again by your loving heart. This is not suffering over suffering. It is the being it and holding space for it, finally, in order to have it go, to move, and to transform from fear into love and from pain into joy again. Trauma healing during Ascension. Trauma is coming up to be felt and healed in these transitional years of our accelerating ascension. Trauma creates a dense frequency vibration in our emotional bodies, our physical bodies, and our energy bodies, and we all have it as a residue from the experience of being in 3D reality. Trauma can be deeply subconscious and hidden by our veil of amnesia. Essentially, trauma cannot come with us into the new Gaia timeline, personally or collectively. Feeling and healing the trauma can only be moved in the densities prior to 5D. Healing trauma is key to our ongoing ascension process into manifestation of our 5D sacred humanity personality and collectively. The trauma can seem bigger than you, especially when you are shaking with it, quaking with it, and fused to it in those situations that trigger it. It can seem bigger in the moments and memories. Trauma can act like magnets to keep parts of you stuck in looping around the same suffering moments over and over again, even as your body ages and time goes on. It can seem bigger in the moments of the PTSD symptoms that can seem so overwhelming as they move through. When it feels like the trauma is bigger than you, then the pain becomes more real than joy. When it feels like the trauma is unhealable, the fear claims more real estate and space than love does. When it feels like the trauma is unknowable, the confusion overcomes any clarity. You may doubt your capacity to hold space for the feeling and processing of trauma, as you haven't been templated and shown and supported to do this. 3D consciousness offers the next drug, the next version, the next quick fix, the next substitution as an answer to this trauma. Even spirituality can answer healing trauma with methods and means that actually just create more and new trauma. These fixes then will somehow try to take the place of your soul big and heart big presence that is most needed here. These things will try to provide a poor replacement for the richness of self-love that is most required here. During these moments that caused trauma from this life and other lifetimes, the parts of you that experienced them felt like they were alone, and they became the traumatic experience with no way to digest it, especially your inner child and inner teenager. As you become a loving, compassionate, non-judgmental presence that can be with them during these traumatic moments, supported by divine energies and higher dimensional soul aspects and guides, these parts of you can digest the trauma and move into a new timeline beyond the experience of it. The only energy that offers true transmutation is love. Anything lesser or denser or coming from a fix-it, judgmental place can't offer the transmutation of trauma that love can. As you become this loving transmutational energy, so are all parts of you and their traumas able to become the love again that they truly are in their essence. This can happen miraculously in the moment when love is offered to the parts of you, of self and soul, that most need it. Even lifetimes of pattern trauma can transmute to love in one moment when felt with the part of you that most needs it. I have seen this happen again and again in just minutes in many sessions. The transmutation of the trauma, the lightening up and healing of it that you experienced from this life and other lifetimes is an essential aspect of your ongoing ascension and awakening process. As you transmute it into love again, you are able to raise your vibrational frequency to love more and more often. And one piece that has become very clear to me after years of engaging in my own healing and holding space for others in this process is the necessity of healing our trauma and wounds at the emotional body level. I intuitively felt the importance of healing my emotional body over 15 years ago, as I could feel there was deep wounding within me that needed my attention and love. I drew the parts work process through the EBE process as the means to access that deep woundedness from this life. This healing work eventually extended to healing the emotional body at the metasoul quantum level when I downloaded my own way to do this as the Soulful Heart process. I feel so grateful that my soul signed up to do the emotional body healing work as a first priority, above and beyond the awakening of my soul gifts and spiritual attainments. I have felt in others the difficulties of choosing to do it the other way around, where the emotional wounding has to get your attention, usually through experiencing repeated patterns of suffering, and pull you down from a loftier place of awakening. My former teacher, who claimed to be non-dual awakened, described doing the emotional work that he was called to do after this awakening as feeling like going down into a grave buried deep in the ground after being exposed to the heights of heaven. I always had the sense that the deeper spiritual awakenings were just waiting there for me and had been cultivated already in many lifetimes. They weren't going anywhere, essentially, and I could access them, download them, and embody them when the time was right. And my ongoing experience has supported this as the spiritual openings wove in with the emotional body processing and naturally and organically shifted to a soul focus when the timing was aligned. It is the emotional body awakening, healing, and maturation, again from this life and other lifetimes, that is actually a new experience for my soul within a human body in a 3D anchored timeline. It is the new frontier and terrain for us to go exploring. I am clear, and have been for many years, that I am here to participate in this emotional body ground myself, and also bridge to other souls who feel the pressing need for it and the importance of it as well. Healing my emotional body as the top priority for me allowed me to ground in and embody the soul awakenings as they began to activate. The awakenings weren't used then as a compensation to not feel a deep, unfelt unworthiness or grabbed at by my inner protector to create more strategy and defense. The opportunities that we now have for emotional body healing is one of the main reasons my soul chose to come here in this lifetime. Psychology and the branches stemming off of it have opened up important access to feel and understand our emotional bodies, including the gift of recognizing parts and subpersonalities as introduced in Carl Jung's work and voice dialogue practice by Hal and Sidra Stone, as mentioned previously. It has opened up collective consciousness awareness around how our subconscious works, validated the impact of our emotions on all areas of our lives, offered how to heal ourselves from trauma, and brought to light the importance of our emotional and mental health. Going to the next level of our ascension process has to include the feeling, healing, and transmutation of traumas from this life and from other lifetimes as they live in our emotional bodies. Trying to bypass the traumas with spiritual access or otherwise divert or distract ourselves from them in order to raise our frequency and ascend is like trying to build a beautiful mansion on an unstable and shaky foundation. I've also discovered that there isn't just trauma within our emotional bodies from specific distressing or disturbing events, such as accidents, abuse, death, and war. Those events are traumatizing, yet the very experience of being in 3D life itself creates trauma, especially for those of us sensitive and empathic starseed souls. We come into this life with so much porosity and openness. This openness then hits 3D density. This often feels like slamming against a brick wall to many parts of us. I felt the sensations of this birthing trauma experience into 3D from accessing my newborn self. I was 6 weeks premature and placed in an incubator for many days to support my weak lungs. There was immediate trauma created from being thrust from the natural incubator of my birth mother's womb and into the artificial lights and harsh sights and sounds of this poor imitation incubator. Birth trauma is actually one of the sacred wounds that we are here to heal, with more about that in the next section. I needed to feel and help digest the trauma of this birth experience and of being in utero with those aspects of myself. The density and polarity of third-dimensional reality engulfs our sensitivities, and our ability to cope with it is greatly tested. The reaction of complete overwhelm to hold the trauma response to 3D life is often buried deep down in our inner child, guarded and protected over by our inner protector, and reinforced into hiding by our inner punisher through punisher and shame loops. This overwhelmed feeling of being in 3D reality creates feelings of helplessness and need to limit our emotional broadband to a narrower frequency to match it. As I've described previously, we then fragment into different aspects of self to deal with it. This fragmentation is a necessary compartmentalization to survive here, yet also creates a sense of disassociation, as parts of us aren't even conscious that they exist as separate energies or of each other. Until we make that conscious bridge to them, parts of us experience and process reality in tunnel vision, in a myopic state of fusion in which there is little sense of the soul's bigger picture and purpose. And we call all of this an I in our 3D culture, when it is actually a very fragmented, disjointed, and traumatized expression of energies that are often in extreme polarity to each other, rather than in collaborative union. It's amazing, really, that we are able to function at all from this fragmented state. This is where the efforts of the 3D self and the inner protector in particular play out. The 3D self is the version that can handle this ever-rumbling current of undigested trauma and somehow be in life, doing what it needs to do to survive, and even feeling temporary moments of fulfillment along the way. Yet the 3D self is often operating from a deep layer of disconnect and, again, disassociation. They become aware of this when life events thrust them into crisis, and their carefully yet still precarious assembled structure seems to come crashing down. And this happens more and more in cycles of death and rebirth as the awakening process begins to happen. The transmutation of trauma, whether from this life or other lifetimes, seems to pivot on our ability to digest it. Digesting it allows the pain, the stress, the agony, the fear frequencies to be moved into love again. If we had been felt in the moment of experiencing the trauma, which again comes up just from being in 3D life, by loving and open-hearted caregivers, it would have been digestible to us. Instead, our caregivers are often the ones creating the trauma. This creates a crazy-making reality for parts of us as the primary source of love, comfort, and security. Our caregivers, our parents, are also often the source of our pain, fear, discomfort, and hurt. Most 3D selves are walking around in huge amounts of backed up, off-gassing, and undigested reactions that come from trauma-based wounds in the emotional body from this life and other lifetimes. They are disconnected from their emotional bodies and unaware of why they are reacting, what the original wound is that is being triggered, and which part of them is in reaction. Becoming aware of what is actually going on inside of you and which specific parts and metasoul aspects allows for the necessary digestion of trauma and healing of the original wound as well. You can become current and porous with your own emotional body, which allows you to digest whatever you need to in the moment that the reaction occurs. You can also use whatever pain comes up as a portal to deeper self-discovery rather than the protector moving into diversion and disconnect mode. By being felt by an open-hearted and empathic person who has also felt parts of themselves, such as what occurs in Soulful Heart sessions, allows for the trauma to finally be digested. In this way, it can be said that it is not our traumas that limit us, but rather our inability to digest them. Lifelong trauma can be healed in mere moments, as the part of you that is holding it is finally able to digest and release it. They can move out of suffering, beyond coping, into healing, and eventually into thriving. The struggling feelings are real. The depressed feelings, the suicidal feelings, the hopeless feelings, the lost feelings, the confused feelings, the I don't belong here feelings, the alienated and the abandoned feelings, the judgment and the corresponding shame feelings, the unworthiness and not being good enough feelings. All of these are real and exist in your emotional body, in your subconscious, and in your soul field. These feelings exist for a reason. They're not there because you're doing something wrong, or because you're not positive enough, or because you are not doing enough yoga, or positive affirmations, or meditation, or spiritual practices, or because you are a sinner, or a dark soul, or because you deserve them as a punishment for your karma. These feelings are there because of traumas you've experienced in this life and other lifetimes and timelines too. Traumas that you agreed to experience as a soul and learn how to transmute as a soul too. Traumas that are still being experienced by parts of you over and over again in a stuck setting of frozen feeling states. These feelings are showing you that these traumas exist. They are compelling evidence of where love is needed. Lead with a curious and compassionate ambassador's heart in response to any of the feelings that parts of you have. See that it is a part of you that is feeling them, no matter how intense they seem, and not all of you. Begin to separate from the feelings with love. Be the bigger space holder for the parts of you in this trauma, and they can start to lean in and reveal to you where they are stuck. These parts can begin to trust and to surrender into love with you. And that is when they can move out of the trauma and into love. That is when they can begin to more deeply unanchor from 3D frequencies and lower 4D bliss mass frequencies and choose the higher timeline with you. Be the bigger energy of love toward all these parts of yourself, as you probably do and are towards so many others outside of you. This is often the biggest feeling of all, that others deserve this objective and compassionate response to their feelings, yet you and parts of you do not. This feeling of unworthiness can receive love and transmute into the visceral, unconditional experience of your core innate goodness as a fractal from divine source. None of these intense feelings are bad. Rather, they are a portal, offering you an opening to endless discovery about yourself and soul. Anxiety and depression as portals. The two emotional states that are so often brought to be fixed or solved in sessions, often by the inner protector, are that of anxiety and depression. These two reactive emotional experiences are so uncomfortable to parts of people, yet they are very often being created by those same parts. In 3D, the emotional states themselves are treated and fixated on, rather than exploring and identifying the actual parts of the self and soul that are feeling them and why they are feeling them. I've discovered that there is always a very good reason for these feeling states to exist. Rather than suppressing them or medicating them, we relate to them as a portal of self-discovery. Seeing them as a portal allows you to shift from fighting them and into loving curiosity about them. Raphael often shares about how the moment he embraced parts work was while having a discussion with a business coach about his depression. And the coach offered, "Did it ever occur to you that a part of you has a very good reason to feel that way?" The answer in 3D is to suppress anxiety or depression, to medicate them with anti-feeling drugs such as antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. The amount of people on these medications has greatly increased over the last 2 decades, especially in teenagers and young adults. The answer in 3D is to fight these feelings, to not let them win, to be stronger than they are. The answer in 3D is to see these emotional states as enemies that must be conquered and controlled, especially if they are interrupting or disrupting your ability to work hard and keep up appearances, which is a top priority in 3D life. The experience of them and their impact on other people needs to be controlled in 3D, especially if they are causing difficult behaviors and an inability to fit in. The experience of anxiety can be so difficult and challenging. Panic attack level anxiety can be hugely debilitating to many people. These attacks can seem to come from nowhere and can be embarrassing, inconvenient, and just plain scary. Even if the trigger for the attacks is known, there is a real and visceral sense of helplessness as it moves through. There can be a near constant state of worry going on as well that practically chews at your third chakra. The inability to feel at ease, at rest, and in goodness inside of your own skin and in life is a frequent experience during chronic anxiety. Anxiety is the downstream byproduct of parts of you, usually the inner child, not experiencing that life was safe, energetically, emotionally, and very often physically. Your inner child cannot actually trust life to be loving, and so they move into an ancient state of distrust that can be near constant. This is fueled by the inner protector and inner punisher's validated lack of trust in the world to be a safe one for your inner child to be in. So they have their own versions of anxiety based on many experiences of life not being safe. The two anxious states fuel each other rather than either of them being able to provide trusting and loving frequencies to the other. Anxiety is usually not about the present moment or what is happening in the now. It is very often a projection of the worst case scenarios or dark imaginings, as a facilitant of mine has called it, that create a strong projection of what could possibly go wrong, what could possibly cause harm and hurt, and then part of you actually running this reality through the emotional body. This is like a worst case scenario emotional dress rehearsal. It can be a very interesting thing to discover what reactions are actually based on things that are happening rather than those that are being anticipated to happen with a growing dread. This is a protection strategy ultimately, because if the protector can anticipate what might go wrong and create even the experience of it for the part of you that would be hurt by it, then the belief is that it won't be so hurtful or devastating when and if it actually happens. Connecting with your inner protector and punisher allows you to feel what their defensive strategies are around anticipating the worst case scenarios. This allows them to digest the moments when they couldn't provide a safe result, an outcome for parts of you, in which they often feel like a failure for that. As they let go of their own over-responsibility and guilt in this area, they can move into more trust in life outcomes and surrender to the divine process. Also, as you, as emerging divine self, begin to make more self-loving choices for you and parts of you, this helps the protector relax and trust. Feeling and digesting the anxiety of your inner child helps them to feel increasingly safe inside of your heart. They begin to trust that they will be taken care of, even if difficult or challenging things happen, as you are now a buffer of love for them during these experiences. As you are current with the parts of you that have anxious reactions and actually feel what they are feeling anxious about rather than trying to avoid it, this makes a big difference in the digestibility of it. Very often there is a good reason or truth within the anxiety which can be revealed once it is felt. The starseed child can have a layer of anxiety that can manifest in panic attacks as well, that comes from undigested abduction experience programs and visits with star family. This can especially be the case for those who are very afraid of the dark as children, had night terrors, and who had experiences and dreams of seeing beings. As we feel the starseed child in these experiences and create a bridge to their star family, this anxiety is able to be digested, allowing for openings in our galactic consciousness. Another possibility for the experience of anxiety can also stem from the metasoul and be a result of very traumatic soul experiences, especially those that involve killing or being killed, that haven't been able to be digested. These experiences of extreme and acute anxiety from these timelines, which is from actually having your life threatened or being killed, can bleed through into the current lifetime. In 3D, the veil of amnesia is thick in the very influential emotions bleeding through reality of other lifetimes, especially for those awakening, is not acknowledged. Yet this existential anxiety is very often underneath the this life triggered anxiety, and is very often actually the root cause of it. As you connect to metasoul aspects in these timelines, you can help them to heal their anxiety-producing experiences by inviting them into a higher timeline experience of love and safety. They can choose to anchor to these higher vibrational outcomes rather than experience the traumatic experiences. As they are bridged to the divine trust frequencies inhabited by your 5D metasoul aspects and ascended teachers, their distrust is slowly replaced by trust. And depression can hang like a thick fog over everything. Life feels meaningless, especially 3D life routines of work, eat, sleep, repeat patterns that go on in endless cycles. This sense of flatness is punctuated by moments of wanting to die, and neither feels comfortable with each other. There can be deep suffering in depressive states, yet it can feel like an itch that you just can't quite scratch, as it can linger on for extended periods of time, sometimes even years for some people. Depression itself creates a feeling of not wanting to do anything about itself or the suffering, as there isn't enough passion, desire, and life juice to shift it. Depression is very often the struggle of the soul to accept and integrate into 3D life. Awakening souls aren't meant to actually assimilate into 3D life as their home frequency, yet they aren't very often supported and initiated into their true soul purpose and galactic essence. If this initiation had happened during our formative teenage years, instead of invalidation, we would have bloomed into a passionate expression of our soul gifts and service of love. Instead, we were conditioned in 3D deadness cycles. Depression is often a result of that conditioning and programming that goes against the grain of our hearts and our souls. Connecting with your inner teenager can help to ease the depression as their creativity is released and discovered with your 4D, 5D self as a loving and supportive soul mentor that they never had. Your metasoul is able to bring in higher dimensional aspects and ascended teachers to provide initiation experiences for them and for you. Your inner teenager increasingly receives validation through these initiatory experiences, rather than the invalidation they likely encountered in 3D school and work systems. Depression is also hugely connected to soul themes and other lifetimes, especially for those souls who are highly creative, such as artists, writers, entertainers, inventors, and visionaries. These creative souls are meant to be channels for divine inspiration and expression. If this creative flow is blocked by undigested traumas, this can create a feeling of depression and a life that feels like it is really not worth living. Their artistic expression itself may become corrupted by 3D goals, such as making money or becoming famous, rather than pure serving divine love motivations. As they drift farther away from divine inspiration, they become increasingly depressed, listless, and sometimes blocked in expressing their creativity at all. As you feel the creative type aspects within your metasoul, you can help them to heal from their experiences, both good and bad, that happened while offering their creative gifts to the world. There is often a deep core feeling of unworthiness underneath their depression, as their soul may not feel worthy to create if it isn't aligned to divine service. They may not feel good enough in their artistic expression to share it with others, which is also a key aspect of healing depression. When creative gifts can be shared with others in service of love for the divine, a rich and constant flow of inspiration comes through that heals the depression. There is an excited, engaged, and passionate feeling about life, for which creativity is then a means to express it. Connecting with emotional states such as anxiety and depression as portals of self-discovery allows for a big shift in your experience of them. Instead of battling them or medicating them, you come to see them as a precious gift that opens up access to these parts of yourself and soul that need you. Over time, the expression of them lessens and eventually fades away altogether, as has been my experience with no drugs needed at all. My experience of depression seems to start in high school, when we moved from Colorado Springs, Colorado, to Palo Alto, California. I left all of my lifelong friends behind without any processing space about it with my parents. It felt to parts of me like they made the decision without any of my input. I felt anger, and yet also I began to feel quite depressed as the school year went on in my new school in California, and I struggled to fit in. Palo Alto was a rich person's town, the host of Stanford University, and my high school was considered a prep school for it. There was suddenly new pressure to be smart in school, plus my physical appearance shifted as I had fairly bad acne and started to gain weight from depression-fueled eating binges. I retreated to my make-believe space as a relief from the depression. I would envision and live out scenarios where I was adored by huge crowds of people as a musician, or by the current boy I had a crush on, or by my parents as I lay in the hospital sick. All of these scenarios made me temporarily feel better as I teleported out of my 3D life that made me unhappy. Yet there were lingering feelings of wanting to die and of killing myself, although I always heard a reassuring voice telling me to just hold on. You're so young and you have so much to do here. I now feel that my metasoul aspects, guides, and the divine coming through to support me as these voices. As I worked with parts of myself over the years, I identified that my inner teenager Jill, the name I went by then, needed to be felt during this time, and I spent much time dialoguing with her, listening to the music she did back then, and being the supportive and loving mentor and adult that she didn't have. She opened up to me, came to trust me, and eventually she went to be in 4D Avalon as a priestess initiate, which made her heart soar to be claimed by something. I also discovered that I needed to express my creativity in writing as a claiming of my soul gifts as a soul scribe that also helped Jill to heal. The pretend scenarios that she used to calm herself and lift her mood are the same gifts of creative visualization and teleportation that I now offer to myself and others in session space through Soulful Heart. The other important layer that came through related to my teenage depression was remembering my role as a galactic ambassador. I began to remember that I served as this in my early teens until I was 17 or so. I would help soothe and calm the kids who were terrified during visits with their star families. I would distract them, play with them, help bridge to them as a human so they would feel less scared. An aspect of the depression I felt at 17 was that I was cut off from this role by my star family and my own higher self, which wanted me to fully immerse myself into 3D living for a phase of time. I began smoking cigarettes during this time, and that also densified my energy to a point where my star family could no longer reach me. My inner teenager felt abandoned by them, no longer having a purposeful mission, and was now truly stuck in 3D life. I'm sharing my experience and process to show that there are often many layers to what we experience and label as a particular emotional state. Depression has been an important portal for me to feel these layers of its expression and why they exist. I could only see the galactic one when it was time for that veil to be lifted. I have come to trust the timing of these revelations and my metasoul aspects, higher self, star family, who are orchestrating when the pieces come together and connect for me. It is always in the right timing, when we are able to digest it, and when it will be meaningful for us. Only love can heal the trauma and the downstream emotional experience of it. As you embrace all parts of yourself and their expressions, you are offering the medicine of love to heal whatever inside of you most needs it. Anger and hurt as portals. Anger is an emotional expression that most people do not enjoy feeling and judge it if they do feel it, especially those who have experienced emotional abuse in the form of a parent who would rage at them. There can be strong suppressive tendencies and strategies toward anger and rage that do not allow the truth underneath it to be expressed. Or if the anger is expressed, it is often in a fusion with the inner punisher that doesn't allow the truth or discernment to land and be heard, whether directed at you or another person. Anger is a portal toward truth-telling, as there is always a truth within the anger that wants to be heard, that has value. Trying to suppress your truth, not respond to it, and not allow it to come out is what seems to then create the manifestation of anger or frustration. When I have invited the anger out to express itself in myself and with others, there's always an important truth that it reveals and wants to be known. The anger very often dissipates quickly when it is allowed to have space. Similar to the misunderstood inner punisher's discernment that comes across as judgments, anger is so often vilified that it doesn't get a chance to actually transmute to what it is in its essence. Anger is also often about clarity coming out, expressing, and then finding its way toward a new boundary to set, especially if it is in reaction to other people's behaviors or actions. In this way, when parts of you get angry at someone else, there is something you are trying to sort out, something you are wanting to advocate for with that person or in your life. Contained within anger is passion as well, as you cannot feel more intense emotions unless parts of you also passionately cared about it. To suppress anger is to suppress passionate expression of any kind in ways that can be limiting. Underneath the anger are feelings and experiences of being hurt or harmed. The anger is feeling the hurt that was caused, often within the inner teenager or inner child, and is trying to protect them, advocate for them, and ultimately wishing to prevent the harm from happening again. In this case, it is usually the inner protector that is feeling the anger and the younger part that is feeling the hurt. It can help to feel both sides of this dynamic in order to separate out what is passionate truth and advocacy and what is hurt and harm reactions. As you feel both sides, you're then able to ground the anger into a clear and necessary advocacy. Anger is often a very reasonable reaction to harm that, again, doesn't usually get to express itself in the moment that it's happening. This dynamic may even have started when you were very young and going through a temper tantrum. Rather than letting you move the energy of it and genuinely being asked to express your feelings, most children are shut down, punished, and told to be quiet. Many of us experienced an adverse reaction from our parents toward our emotional states, whatever they were, and especially if anger was expressed. Other parts of us then learn to control anger rather than express it. Anger can also be a metasoul expression from souls who have often chosen to be advocates, activists, leaders, and visionaries. And there can be a fine line between passionately advocating for change and transformation and projecting outrage that is actually sourced from within onto whatever situation is going on the outside. An example is animal rights activists who are outraged at those who abuse animals or eat meat, yet they are consumed with anger and disgust at these people, even hating humanity for doing this. This comes from a place of polarized and charged judgment against these people, rather than from a passionate invitation to transform. Outrage expressed in this way draws more outrage, rather than resolution and peace. The message gets lost and the invitation to embrace the anger as well. Feeling the hurt that is underneath the anger with the parts of you that is feeling it can also help the anger to resolve itself. The inner child can carry deep hurts from many harmful experiences that have happened to them in your life. Just the experience of being in 3D life itself can be a harmful one that causes trauma, as I previously mentioned. Hurt grows as vulnerability is not able to be expressed in a safe way by your inner child and other parts of you. As hurt is felt by your 4D, 5D self within your inner child and other parts who hold it, it is then able to transmute back to vulnerability again. The healing of this rage and hurt dynamic becomes the ability to passionately advocate for and share your truth while also being vulnerable as you do. This is a powerful expression that invites others to take in your truth, see if it resonates for them, and also keep their hearts open and sensitive to you and themselves. Sacred wounds. The experience of trauma and of being wounded is actually a sacred process, even as it can be quite painful and challenging. 3D sees our wounds as something that needs to be fixed or medicated or cured. The evidence of our wounding is seen in 3D as a sign that we are ultimately sinners, that we are broken, and that we are not worthy to be loved by the divine. The divine actually learns along with us as we discover how to heal our wounds individually and collectively, and eventually are able to stop the suffering cycles that create them. The divine was already in a state of absolute perfection. So the choice to start to fragment off aspects of itself was with a deep desire and curiosity about what would happen during that experiment. The result then of wounding and trauma is not perceived by the divine as something that makes us bad, wrong, or unworthy. The divine cannot judge us in that way, as it has completely unconditional love toward us as its human children. The divine is eager to provide support and quantum healing frequencies with us, both individually and collectively, when we are ready to return to health and wholeness again. There are specific sacred wounds that we choose as souls to experience in order to move them from pain and fear frequencies back into healthy ones again. This process of experiencing in order to heal occurs in repeated patterns over many lifetimes. The content and situations can vary greatly from one lifetime to another, yet the energy of the trauma is the same. It holds a vibrational frequency that you can begin to track and recognize. As you go into your soul healing in a quantum way by connecting with your metasoul aspects, common themes begin to emerge amongst them. You begin to put the pieces together of your own soul's puzzle. You start to follow the breadcrumbs that have been laid out for you beyond the veil for you to find your way back home. The patterns and cycles become revealed to you, and more sense is made of what your experiences and choices have been in this life as connected to your metasoul's legacy. This bigger picture perspective about your life allows more feelings of support and empowerment in your ongoing journey. Of the common sacred wounds, some are explored in deeper ways than others, depending on what your metasoul has agreed to heal for the collective. Some of the sacred wounds are a shared experience by all of us who choose to incarnate into 3D lifetimes, and also reflective of our experience of being fractals off of the divine source. These are the sacred wounds and traumas that I've most seen in myself and in my work with others. Birth experience, divine separation and abandonment, core wounds, daughter and son experience and birth family, matrix experience, human and reptilian, abduction and galactic, sexual, emotional, physical abuse, persecution and bullying, victim and martyr, perpetrator, abuser, guru, wounded healer, sisterhood, brotherhood, and community, 3D birth experience. As I previously mentioned, just being born into and living in 3D density creates trauma and wounding for us. Our soul porosity as highly sensitive baby beings clashing against the thick, suffocating, and polarized frequencies of third-dimensional reality is, as I've said, like being slammed into a brick wall. Many inner protectors have told me that they are formed as a separate part of the self immediately at birth to provide some means of armor and protection against these densities for the fragile and precious newborn soul. When did you start protecting me, we will ask them, and so often, as soon as you were born, is the response. That is a lot to let in by itself, that our protection and fragmentation of self starts from the moment that we are born. Inner protectors have offered that we most likely wouldn't survive without that protection, as the energies are just too harsh here. So it's actually a necessity to create an inner protector, or really to call in the energies of our gatekeeper to show up as a 3D energy in order to survive here. Some souls also bring in soul family and metasoul aspect support from the moment of birth as well, of which most of us are not consciously aware. I did eventually become aware of the angels and star family around me during birth as I connected to my newborn self in the incubator. I could then see them hovering and floating around the incubator itself. It was so touching to feel their support and loving energies being provided to get me through an admittedly dicey medical situation in my earliest childhood physical development. My newborn self also shared with me about connecting with a very kind neonatal nurse who reached into the incubator and let me grasp her finger and eventually held me in her arms as well. This contact provided some sense of physical touch, of love and affection to me that were missing from my own birth mother. Being thrust out of the warm environment of our birth mothers and into the harsh setting of 3D is traumatizing for all of us, even when there aren't any complications. There's more consciousness now about the impact on newborns during the birth experience, with more attention being paid to creating a calm, soothing, and loving birth setting, preferably at home and into a pool of water. Midwifery is gaining in population again as the ancient art of facilitating a soul into the body is remembered and honored on the spiritual level. Recognition of the souls involved in the birthing process, and not just the physical bodies, is an important aspect of making the birth experience less traumatic. Yet just being in our birth mother's womb during pregnancy is a very mixed experience for most of us. There's a comfort in being in a womb, like floating in a liquid nest with all of our needs taken care of immediately through the umbilical cord. Yet, unless our birth mother was completely and unconditionally devoted to the gestation process and becoming a parent in all moments with a strong support system around her, we also experienced her mixed emotional states as energies that we totally absorbed and became. Any of her feelings went into us, such as resistance, uncertainty, not wanting a child, self-doubt about being a mother, traumatic circumstances of the birth, fear of losing the baby from past miscarriages, etc. If it was a difficult pregnancy and or childbirth with complications, there can be a feeling in us as newborns of having actually caused these problems. I was 6 weeks premature, born to a mother who was only 19, not really in love with my birth father, who was addicted to drugs and left us when I was 2, and she consciously wanted to have an abortion if it had been legal at the time. Lucky for me, it didn't become legal until the next year. although I can still remember the pain when my birth mother told me that she would have aborted me if given the chance. I was able to connect the pain that came up in hearing that to my actual experience of being a fetus inside of her. My fetus self could actually feel that I was not really wanted, that I was making life inconvenient and difficult for her, and that she didn't really love my birth father. As I connected to this fetus part of me, we cried many tears together as I felt her pain of not being wanted, of being rejected already, even before birth. And I filled the space around her with white light and lots of love. Mother Mary became a loving mother surrogate, as she has been so many times for parts of me, providing strong frequencies to this part of me of being very much wanted, celebrated, and honored in choosing to come into a physical body. She also served as a midwife to my birth experience, putting me in a beautiful pink love bubble as I came into this world. Although I was still whisked away to be put in an incubator without any physical connection to my birth mother, Mary provided my newborn self with a steady and consistent motherly presence as a loving shelter for me to rest in as this chaotic experience was happening around me. This has been some of my means of healing my gestation and birth trauma experience into 3D. This is also the bridging work we do with women in sessions to feel these aspects that exist before the mind's recall of memories. Everything that we experience is stored in our emotional bodies and can be accessed again through connecting directly with the part that experienced it. This kind of emotional memory is beyond the mind's capacity to recall and opens up as you access your emotional body and subconscious through the bridge of parts and metasoul work. To facilitate this healing process, I would suggest connecting to your newborn and fetus selves, which is easier to access as you work with your inner child and inner protector. Your inner protector provides a bridge to these very precious parts of you once they are sure that it will be safe for them to do so. The gift of healing them is that they can then integrate their purity, innocence, and highly porous sensitivity into your inner child and into you. Divine separation and abandonment. A primary and sacred wound to be healed is the original abandonment feelings of separation from the divine. We were once in complete oneness with the divine and the divine with us. As the original fragmentation off of the divine occurred and progressed, the feelings of abandonment and pain grew. It feels to me that is usually at the metasoul level where we become individual metasouls, separating out of our soul family monad groups, that this wounding occurs. This experience of becoming an individual consciousness separate from our soul families creates our metasoul orphan child who feels left behind and cut off from an infinite source of divine and soul family love. This need to be part again of the divine whole and soul family doesn't really get answered in what our biological 3D birth parents can give us and offer us, no matter how loving and supportive they may be. Our orphan child remains relatively untouched and unfelt within the quantum field of our metasoul, often floating and unanchored to any sense of home or family to belong to until we bridge to them in this way. Abandonment experiences that we have during this lifetime mirror and trigger this original divine separation wound into our consciousness. Our inner child feels the abandonment pain of our birth parents in their disconnection, rejection, invalidation of us in this life. This brings up more sense of missing and longing for our soul family connections that are so easy, fluid, and porous in the higher dimensional frequencies. There are other wounds and traumas that occur from our birth family experience too, which I'll share about in an upcoming section. Our starseed child holds the abandonment pain of our star family leaving us to experience 3D life on Earth, seemingly without any support or guidance being offered. This abandonment pain can be quite deep and is usually buried in our consciousness until we remember visits with our star family again and reconnect to their presence. Feelings of being trapped on Earth as a prison planet, being an alien compared to other people, waiting to go home, and feeling like you don't belong here on Earth are some expressions of this abandonment in your starseed child. There can be many layers to feel and heal in this abandonment wounding. It has taken me years of inner work and work with others to become more aware of how these layers express, which parts of the self and metasoul are involved, and how to heal the trauma from these experiences. The layers of abandonment pain that the inner child holds are usually the first phase of healing this, as their trauma is the most present and accessible within the emotional body. Next, or woven in, is the starseed child, who opens up to be felt and seen as the veil is lifted to bridge to soul star family and galactic consciousness awakening. Healing the orphan child is a deep experience that usually is only accessible after years of emotional body and spiritual healing work at a core level and even over multiple lifetimes. This is also available more readily to those souls who have signed up to heal this within themselves and for the collective, especially those who have chosen to really experience a vast and deep separation from the divine. It doesn't feel like very many souls consciously get to this level of self-healing, as they may be too caught up in this life and other lifetimes' sacredly wounded experiences to get to it. The original separation wound from the divine does eventually reveal itself as being the root cause of much of the suffering experience of abandonment in this life and in other lifetimes. It is a profound and interesting experience for me as I begin to now access this divine separation wound and the orphan child with those in sessions with me for longer periods of time. With one particular facilitant, she was able to bridge to her metasoul's original separation from the divine and to her orphan child after many years of emotional and spiritual work, her own work with others for many years as a healer, and a year of regular sessions with me. I'll call her Z. What Z and I were shown as we went into this divine separation experience was a scene of being cast off from a very bright light source of love. The light kept getting farther and farther away as her metasoul was pushed out and away from it. As her metasoul was fragmented off, it felt like when an astronaut severs their tethers to their spaceship and is suddenly floating in deep space without any anchoring nor means to get back to their ship. It was a truly awful feeling of having no control, a sinking sense of losing something very, very precious while being powerless to get it back, and being rejected by a very deep love suddenly and for no reason. Z and I connected with her orphan child, who seemed to be floating in this empty space and reliving this pain over and over again. Her orphan had no sense or perception of the umbilical cord that still remains to the divine, that can actually never be severed. Her orphan was in so much distress over being cast out to die that they couldn't feel connection to the divine any longer in any form. And we could feel how her soul chose to be a holder of the memory of the loss of divine connection for the collective. This made the feeling of being truly separate even more pronounced. We reached out to this orphan part, and I provided a lifeline to them by showing them my divine cord, which comes into our subtle energy bodies through our God spot in the middle of our shoulder blades. Eventually, her orphan trusted me to pull her back to the light using my cord to guide us back up, which ended up being into a light ship filled with her soul and star family as a bridge to the divine. It was a big recovery from trauma movement for this part of her metasoul, who finally could start to experience reunion with the divine again. Beginning this journey to heal this divine separation wound is also supported by feeling any false God frequencies in this life and in other lifetimes in order to access divine love and connection again. False God energies primarily seem to show up in the punitive and dogmatic hymn God offered by mainstream religions and some spiritualities, as I described in this section about the false light, false God program. False gods can also be made out of parents and caregivers out of necessity, gurus and teachers who are still plugged into the matrix, and even partners in relationships. The false God energies can create this sense of belonging and being claimed, yet they don't actually provide the real love, nourishment, and coming home sense that parts of us most need. False God frequencies can also make the abandonment feeling more pronounced, as they usually put something in the middle of your connection with the divine. This can trigger your orphan to feel even farther away from being good enough to be chosen for union again. Your 5D crystal child essence arises out of the healing frequencies of all this abandonment as the inner child lands in your heart and receives love and support from you as a new parent. Your star seed heals as they reconnect to the star family support systems and even star family genetics, biology, DNA that had previously been suppressed. Your orphan child heals as they receive unconditional love, support, and validation from the Divine Mother and Divine Father again. This spectrum of wounded child experience can then heal and express as the crystal child who feels connected and loved in this life, other lifetimes, galactic, and divine existential levels. Core wounds: unworthiness, disconnect, being unforgivable, etc. I am unworthy. I am unforgivable. I am wrong. I am bad. I do not deserve to live. I am sinful. I am disconnected. These can be energies of the core wounds that exist within us all at a personal and on a meta-soul level that seem to be a byproduct of the separation experience from the divine. There is an internalization in the emotional body of our meta-soul that there must be something fundamentally wrong with us to be cast off by the divine like that, when we had previously known only blissful oneness. These core wounds are then fed and amplified by life experiences that seem to mirror that sense of being wrong and unworthy, especially within our birth family relationships. Our metasoul experiences the vibration of these wounds as an undercurrent or river beneath all of life, especially during 3D and lower 4D timelines and lifetimes. In these denser lifetimes, the veil of amnesia can block and obscure the remembrance of the soul's choice to fragment away from the divine as an ultimate act of love with and for the divine. The sensation of being deeply loved for your essence unconditionally by the divine is also more difficult to access and feel. Core wounds are existential in nature at their root causal level. Yet there is a circumstantial and situational off-gassing or triggering of them that can happen as a regular occurrence. Core wounds such as unworthiness are different from energy tones and that which we might identify as emotional reactions or emotional moods. I believe they exist in our emotional bodies and our individual personal metasouls, yet also in the collective emotional body. Core wounds run deep, very deep. In my experience, they do not really form into a sub-personality or part of the 3D self like the inner protector and inner child. Core wounds are visceral, without language. They ooze out with the frequencies with which they have been formed. They're not really able to be related with in the relational way that we do when connecting with parts of ourselves and metasoul aspects. Core wounds are beyond the mind, cannot really be talk therapized or hypnotized or cleared through energy sessions, although these things can help. The main way to heal core wounds seems to be the continual connection to the parts of you that experience them, such as within your inner child, inner protector, inner punisher, inner teenager. It is connecting with these parts of you and getting separation between them and you that then clears enough out of the way for the core wounding to come up. This is the process we bridge to you during sessions and the work you do on your own. A guide through this murky, hugely unknown, and previously deeply suppressed terrain who has been going through it themselves can be really important to accessing these core wounds. As this separation happens from the parts of your 3D self, then you can begin to feel the core wounds that lie beneath. Deep pools of oozing core unworthiness, disconnect, and sense of being unforgivable. These words don't really suffice as descriptions, yet they're the closest that we have. When these core wounds finally come up after much self-loving, space-holding, and differentiation, negotiation with the parts, there isn't much that can be done but to feel and be with it. I've compared a core wound coming up to having the stomach flu. It feels quite uncomfortable and uncontrollable as it moves through, yet you do know that you'll feel relief when it is finally over. There may be stories and scenes associated with these core wounds coming up, but often there's not. There may be connections to this life, childhood experiences with birth family, and especially parents, but these are often the surface reasons for its existence. There may be metasoul themes and patterns that relate to these core wounds, some of which you can track and some you can't. There's ultimately a surrender needed beyond the mind's need to track and know what is going on related to a core wound, and just really the deep desire and patient willingness to lovingly hold space for it to heal. The deep dive into this core wounding is what we seem to be supported to go into with these high frequencies of loving light coming in during ascension, with a more palatable sense of our ethereal guides and aspects and connection to the Divine Mother and Divine Father. We're able to feel more safety to go there than we have before. It was easier to be distracted before by the surface stuff of reactions, triggers, and projections. Still, many souls are being distracted by these things on the surface and not going deeper beyond life content to feel how these core wounds express inside of their emotional bodies and metasoul at this deeper existential level. Yet for those who are open to going within, this seems to be the time and phase to do so. There are many rewards for doing so, the biggest one being the opening of your higher heart to receive and give love with self and others. All this talk of core wounds doesn't mean that we are broken or need fixing. We have wounds. Yet our wounding is not what we are. It can seem that way when they remain hidden away, existing as an underground, operating energy in so many areas of life, impacting so many areas of our lives. Yet our infinite love essence can illuminate and hold this wounding and invite them to integrate into the light of love that we are. Daughter-son experience and birth family. The experience of family in 3D consciousness is a challenging one for everyone, especially those souls who are more sensitive, porous, and older. The structure of the 3D family itself is a crucible that sets up the experience of both deep trauma and significant growth opportunities. Recovery from childhood and ongoing traumatic experiences with birth family can be intense and multi-layered for many people. Most 3D families are heavily conditioned over multiple generations to follow the rules of 3D living, keep up appearances, remain together no matter what, and usually are not very real or authentic with each other. Ongoing and often extreme abuses, suffering, and codependence are the norm in most 3D family relationships and generational family lines. The choices made for our birth family experience happen on the soul level, as there really is such an opportunity for healing and transformation through it. Some family members often choose to be birth family members, yet the amnesia around the soul connection can be quite foggy and thick. In this way, it can feel like those in your birth family are very different from you, dissonant and in opposition. Yet on a higher level, souls from the soul family may choose particular polarizing roles to play for each other, and what experiences to have with each other for the ultimate healing of their metasoul's patterns and for the collective. Since we don't have access to this soul choice perspective, especially as children, it feels to parts of us as if the often dissonant, traumatic, and abusive birth family experience is the only known reality. We fully immerse within it in this way, pulling the veil down thick and deep. This can be a crazy-making thing, as it conflicts with our loving, resonant, and deeply nourishing experience of our soul family monad group and with the divine. Instead of harmony, there is discord. Instead of complete understanding of each other, there are often profound misunderstandings. Instead of feeling deeply and completely resonant, there is dissonance and disagreement. It's the exploration of these polarities that we're actually wanting in our birth family experiences, even as much as they feel like hindrances to our awakening in the moment. Some souls have signed up to help heal the family line, bringing light to the inherited lineage of woundedness and dysfunction that passes through families generation after generation. These souls are compelled to remain in relationship with their birth family members, with often tight boundaries in place, in order to facilitate and bridge these healing possibilities. I have found that most souls are not aware that they have agreed to play this role and serve this purpose for their birth families. It can help them understand why they are compelled to attempt to bring healing to their family, even when it can be quite difficult to do so. The question for them becomes about if it is serving them as an awakening being to be in connection with their family on a transactional level that is nourishing for them. Because if it isn't actually nourishing for them, you can be sure it isn't nourishing or effective for the family members involved. I have discovered in my own process and with others that it can be helpful to connect with the part of you that most deeply holds the experience of being a daughter or a son. The inner daughter and inner son are a composite of parts such as the inner child and inner teenager, specifically holding the frequencies of relationship within your birth family and with your parents. For women, connecting with their inner daughter brings them right into the frequencies of experience with their birth families. They are then able to bridge to this part of themselves with much love, nurturing, and compassion with Divine Mother's support. For men, connecting with the inner son allows them to drop into the part of themselves that was most impacted by their parents and also by their sibling relationships. There can also be significant wounding that happens as a result of sibling relationships. What position you hold in the birth order can play a part in that as well, whether oldest, youngest, or in the middle. If you are an only child, the trauma experiences can be lessened by not having to deal with siblings, yet there can be a deep loneliness in the experience as well. The experience of being in a 3D consciousness-based family is such a shift from our higher dimensional experiences of family. In Lemuria, for example, families were consciously chosen in a process spanning many years, with couples choosing to have children only when it was deeply connected to their soul purpose expression. Those children were then embraced and initiated by the whole community, and not just their set of biological parents. There's acknowledgement in higher frequency timelines that the impact on the developing child can be very deep, and it's held as a deep honor to be chosen as a parent by a soul and to choose to become one. In civilizations like Lemuria and Atlantis, there are qualifications of emotional and spiritual maturity as well as for the couple who is choosing it before parenthood can happen. Whereas in 3D, anyone can become a parent with no pre-qualifications necessary. There are more pre-qualifications necessary to become a driver and graduate from high school than there are to be in complete and total charge and care for another human being. When you feel this from a higher perspective, it's not surprising that there is so much trauma, abuse, and difficulty that occurs for us in the 3D family arrangement. As you connect to your inner daughter or son and offer them the healthy and nourishing parenting energies that they have most needed, they're able to transmute into a higher frequency of being a child of the divine. Remembering our birthright as a child, a daughter or son of the Divine Mother and Divine Father is a tender, supportive, and transformational frequency that supports our ongoing ascension and awakening. Matrix experience, human and reptilian. As previously mentioned in this book, our matrix-generated reality as human beings began after the fall of Atlantis, as the last Golden Age civilization collapsed, in which humanity's consciousness vibrated at a level beyond 3D. The 3D matrix is a holographic projection created to hold and contain humanity within a certain bandwidth frequency of consciousness. The 3D matrix seems to be broadcast using primarily light and sound waves sourced from the lower 4D matrix, which is fueled by humanity's unhealed archetypal energies and collective unconscious wounding. Repeated cycles of incarnational suffering patterns and a thick veil of amnesia serve to keep most of humanity plugged into its manufactured reality. Both matrices are run and managed by one mind, or the group, or hive mind, or programmers, as I have also heard it called. An artificial intelligence, AI, entity that is connected to an ancient reptilian race and other races, also including some humans, that are polarized to represent fear and darkness. Each human within the 3D matrix seems to have a reptilian counterpart that is plugged into the one mind program on a lower 4D level. The reptilian self is not conscious of being used by the one mind as an energy source to fuel the 3D matrix that the human lives within. Liberation from the matrix system becomes possible for both the human and its reptilian counterpart as awakening occurs for each of them together. The trauma created in our emotional bodies from being in the 3D matrix can be fairly deep and is often about being controlled, not feeling free, feelings of being trapped and powerless, disliking the 3D rules, and not fitting in with the world around you. There can be acute feelings of being disenfranchised, disconnected, and detached from the 3D world. Feelings of being taken advantage of produce lingering outrage at the unfair systems that run the 3D world. Feeling like a slave to the 3D system to work, sleep, and start all over again until you die. Sometimes there's a projection toward an unknown enemy, and sometimes there is a conscious experience of being attacked, hijacked, and manipulated. These wounds, simmering beneath the surface, lead many souls down a path of awakening as they begin to seek, research, and discover this alternative reality to what we have been presented in 3D. They feel it like an itch that they cannot scratch with mainstream answers. It's the pain of these wounds and wanting relief from them that fuels the quest. They go down the rabbit hole of discovery that leads eventually to the revelation of the Matrix reality. As more souls move into the disclosure phase of this process, the wounding can be even more triggered and expressed as extreme outrage, shock, and anger at the Archons, Cabal, Illuminati, Draco, and elite powers. These feelings can be important expressions as you move through the stages of grief that are part of the unplugging process, including the hurt at the harm done to you. To remain in these emotional states with an us against them mentality, however, can limit spiritual and emotional growth, keeping emotional wounds open and festering, rather than healing through acceptance, forgiveness, and compassion. What actually seems to heal the trauma from being plugged into the matrix is to feel parts of you in order to process and digest this experience with them. For the inner protector, there can be an acute sense of having failed to prevent it and fatigue from constant vigilance to keep you safe while you are within it. You can help them to understand that the matrix reality was ultimately a choice by your soul on the higher level to more fully immerse into the 3D experiment. There is nothing that your protector could have done to prevent it, as unplugging and plugging into the matrix is the agreement for being born into this 3D timeline. For the 3D self, it can feel like ego death or an acute self-identity crisis to unplug from the 3D matrix, as it is the only world they have ever known. There can be very real shock and cognitive dissonance for them to let go of the system that they have been within and manipulated by, but also known as a familiar home. Unplugging from the 3D matrix is usually a process that occurs over many years so that the acclimation is easier and more gradual. A recovery period is necessary as your emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies detox from the matrix and calibrate to life in the free world of expanded consciousness. As the 3D self receives support and a loving bridge to your higher self, coming into your body and direct experience of divine compassion and connection, they are able to fully let go of the 3D matrix and integrate into your essence expression. There's also trauma for your reptilian self and counterpart as they unplug from the 4D matrix and one mind AI program. They are usually suddenly and abruptly dislodged from the program, rejected in a way, once their consciousness becomes aware of itself. This happens for them as it happens for you during the disclosure and awakening process. You are waking up simultaneously together. Humans actually have the advantage here, as we are still individualized in our consciousness with a strong sense of I or ego. This is when we are served by our ego or 3D self, for it has an independent orientation to life. For the plugged-in reptilians, all they have ever known is being we without even a personal name to go by or identify with. They have no sense of self-identity, which allows them to be completely compliant. I have gotten the sense that this is the ultimate plan for humanity as well, although there is a reluctance around implementing it due to the one mind's fascination with our independent thoughts, actions, and feelings. And with more and more humans awakening, it's difficult to keep us plugged into the 3D matrix at all. It can be important to remember that the one mind believes that it is doing the right thing by the reptilians and for humans. The sense is that it is trying to save us from ourselves, even if that means taking away some or most of our freedoms and all sense of individual self for the plugged-in reptilians. Some of the reptilian selves that I have assisted to unplug during sessions are in a high state of post-traumatic stress and trauma. They are frail and pale due to having their energy used to fuel the 3D matrix projection for their human counterpart. Their emotional bodies are underdeveloped, and they are often numb, disconnected from their feelings, and non-relational. They're not used to being connected with directly, so it can take time for them to get used to responding to you, yet they're ultimately capable of forming intimate bonds with you. As the trauma from being plugged into the matrix heals for both your 3D self and your reptilian counterpart, you're able to feel the deep bond that exists between you. You have shared every moment of your life together with them as witness to it all. They have essentially lived through your experiences, your feelings, and your journey. As they recover and are able to move into their higher vibrational frequency of upper 4D, their reptilian scales start to glisten and shine. They become very beautiful, both inside and out. They're natural ambassadors who become determined to help their fellow plugged-in reptilians get free. Abductions and star family visits. As I mentioned in the Starseed Child section of this book, there is often a deeper layer of trauma within us related to the experience of abductions and visitations with our star family and other galactic beings during our lifetime. There can be very thick layers of amnesia around these experiences, as there is the usual veil of amnesia around remembrance of our galactic consciousness, plus advanced technology that seems to wipe our memory of it until we are ready to remember it again. Yet I have found that often patterns of having severe panic attacks, night terrors, and nightmares, and a core sense of being powerless can be linked to trauma from abduction experiences. Some PTSD symptoms can be linked to these experiences as well. As I shared about previously, I was able to start remembering these visits that occurred in my childhood and teenage years by connecting with my starseed child, Aurora. She provided a bridge to them by expanding and going into the portal memory of flying over a field of corn in Kansas during a summertime visit there. There is usually some kind of memory like this that bleeds through and allows an opening. People may experience this as dreams of light beings, physical memory of being lifted up out of their beds, encounters with strange and reoccurring noises, and knocks on physical objects. This is often not just memories from the past, yet rather can also be ongoing attempts to create a bridge to you from your star family. It does seem that rather than physical abduction, it's more common now in the last 20 years for star family to communicate through dreams, visions, and meditation. They seem to get that physically taking our bodies has led to quite a bit of undigested trauma for us in our physical bodies and in our emotional bodies. I've also been offered that there have been different groups of galactic beings that conducted physical abductions during the last 70 years or so. The more scientific, cold, and calculating abductions tended to be assisted by the gray beings and also with the zetas. These species tend to be less emotionally based or empathic and have mostly conditioned out their emotional bodies, replacing themselves with computer systems. There may be a connection in these abductions to the fear-based reptilians, if you want to call them that, and the human elites, the Cabal, Illuminati. They seem to be particularly fascinated by hybrids and those with strong, intuitive, and empathic gifts. The most sensitive types of souls, unfortunately, as well. Some of the trauma from abductions is due to these experiences that were often truly frightening and invasive. There is also a question about if the abduction experiences actually occurred or are just planted there as programs by the one mind AI matrix. This especially seems to happen for those who are natural galactic ambassadors and powerful star seeds. The memories of violent and traumatizing abductions with unfeeling ETs can actually be a smokescreen, memories falsely planted to cover over the connection and need for our star families. Visits with star family are of a different tone than these kinds of abductions, whether real or programmed. They have a reunion feeling to them, a sense of checking in and being supported. Many tears can flow as this happens, and the trauma of separation is healing. There is often an ambassador of your star family that will come forward and act as a representative for them, as Bink the Arcturian has been for me. Usually they will be a species that you may already know something about or do not have any adverse reaction to connecting with initially. Often people are drawn to specific types of star beings for a deeper reason that connects to their galactic family. The ones that people seem to be the most interested in right now are the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, and the Sirians. I have previously shared about all of these in this book, so you could feel into who you are drawn to and invite them to begin connecting with you. The main piece that has been important in healing our abduction, visitation wounds, and programs is the lifting of the thick veil around it. Negotiation and connection with your gatekeeper opens up access to these experiences that are beyond mental memory, stored in your cellular memory and emotional body memory. The gatekeeper can be reluctant to open this up, as the emotional charge can run so deep for the inner child. Yet, with careful negotiation and a sense of readiness from you, they begin to give you more and more access to these memories and a deepening activation connection as well. Sexual, emotional, mental, and physical abuse. When I began holding space with women for ascension processing and activation, I really didn't realize how much of the attention and focus in sessions would go toward the digestion of abusive experiences. Whether the experience of emotional, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, or a combination of all, the digestion of the actual experience of it with the part of you who experienced it seems to be crucial to healing the trauma from it. Digestion of abusive experiences is not just about remembering them and talking about them in an I or me voice, as many of us have done in typical therapy sessions, or just receiving energy healings to move or clear the trauma, as that doesn't seem to digest it at this relational, deeper emotional body level. Yet rather, it's when we can connect and drop into the part of us that actually experienced the abuse while they are experiencing it and offer love to them, that it can actually heal. Parts of you provide a direct link to these experiences because they are still living them out in the now. There's no past for them. There aren't really stored memories to go back to. There's only the ongoing and looping feeling of being abused over and over again. The undigested trauma of these experiences is what creates the loop, as it is like a record skipping from a scratch. It can't go on to play the next groove until the scratch is fixed or moved beyond. Each part of us has a different reality to the abuse experiences as well. The inner protector often has feelings of being helpless and powerless as they watch the abuse happen to the inner child, teenager, and adult part of you. This can keep the protector stuck in hyper protection mode, even as they feel completely inadequate to stop the abuse, to help heal the trauma that they are very aware is vibrating in other parts of you. It's the protector that gives us access to the abuse as it is happening and bridges to the part of you that most needs your love and attention. They receive your support and love as well, and are then able to let go of the protective stance they have been in all these years. The protector can then be current to your life and catch up with you, rather than filtering your current reality through the abuse experience filter. The main digestion, of course, is with the part of you that experienced the abuse itself. For an infant and young child, this is a very mixed and confusing experience, and they often blame themselves for the abuse and internalize that they must have been very bad to have received it. In the cases of sexual abuse in early childhood, this can create quite a schism in the personality, with many parts fracturing off into different times and places. This seems to happen primarily as a defense mechanism by the inner protector, who sort of hides the inner children aspects away to keep them safe, to preserve their innocence. It's a loss of innocence and sense of safety in the world that can be so difficult to process for parts of us who experience abuse. Reconnecting with them as the abuse is happening is usually about going into a memory that represents the pattern of abuse that was experienced. The protector can usually pinpoint a pivotal moment of this, that they are, to some degree, still in that moment standing guard. You are witness to the abuse, offering love to the part of you experiencing it and your protector, and bridging the parts out of the scene into a higher frequency space, relocating to a higher frequency and safe space with divine guides and/or higher dimensional metasoul aspects happens in an organic way when the part is ready to move on. I do find that those who have done much healing work on themselves around being abused are usually able to move to this next and deeper level in an expedited way. There is less charge, more awareness, and fewer emotional reactions to sort through as you gain access to the abuse itself and the parts who experienced it. There is more sense of forgiveness and compassion toward the abuser as well. All healing work is good work in that way, as it serves to create a pathway of love to transmute the wounding. Drawing abusive experiences with others is also a soul theme and pattern that is playing out in this life, with often the same souls involved with it. Sometimes the roles are reversed, and you are the perpetrator of the abuse rather than the receiver. Being the receiver, however, is often a choice to be an ambassador of light to the abuser, with you playing this role for your own growth and theirs. When we can shift from feeling like the victim, even while we validate the harm experienced by parts of us as real, we can then feel the ambassadorship that we have signed up for on a soul level. This brings in new frequencies of self-empowerment and sense of purpose in the abuse, which can be so hard to understand from our inner child's perspective. Healing of abuse is a complicated, multiple-layered process that can take many years to feel and sort through. As we connect to the soul themes within our metasoul and the abusive patterns, this deepens the work beyond this life focus and broadens the perspective and quantum healing opportunities. The answer to the "why would I sign up to experience this?" question gets a deeper, more specific, and even more satisfying answer. Persecution and bullying. For those of us awakening to ascension and becoming way showers during this phase, we have often chosen the path of rebellion, going against the norm, being disruptors, following our hearts and souls against the prevailing mainstream consciousness in many other lifetimes. We are the healers, midwives, witches, rebels, activists, and reformers that then draw the fear and scrutiny of others and can be labeled as traitors, enemies of the state, deserters, and worse. This makes us magnets and draws for judgment and persecution from others anchored to 3D and lower 4D fear places. For those plugged into the control matrix, we are threatening to them and to the status quo programs that they follow. The more you speak, teach, share your truth, and come out in this life in contrast to the mainstream 3D consciousness, the more intense the fear may grow inside of you that you will be put down, kicked at, insulted, ganged up on, jailed, and even killed. This fear can show up in anxiety and nervousness, acute self-consciousness that comes from judging yourself, resistance to take the next steps towards service, even as you know what to do, and self-judgment about your inability to successfully offer your soul purpose here, if you even know what that is. There can be self-sabotaging patterns that play out with the inner punisher, providing plenty of fuel for the fire. The fear of persecution is often one that lies deep inside of our souls. There may not be much, if any, this life experience of actual persecution that is creating this fear, and that is what can be confusing about it for people. Maybe they have consciously not known this kind of persecution, yet their soul has, and therefore the trauma still vibrates in the metasoul field. It vibrates there from lifetimes of experiencing a range of exile, banishment, being ostracized, being punished, being jailed, witch trials, inquisitions, being called crazy, and even being hospitalized, betrayed by loved ones, and more. Many awakening people are aware that they have a fear of persecution and can track when it comes up, usually connected to service in some way, or in relationships when there is more need for boundary setting and revealing your soul. Many sensitive souls have drawn bullying experiences as children that mimics this persecution experience for them to look at and heal. Being bullied by other children or even adults can leave a lasting trauma that impacts at the self-worth level, even as it taps into the core persecution wound from other lifetimes as well. The energy of bullying often is the same as that of the persecution lifetimes, even if the content and situations are different and the severity as well. Connecting to the scenes that most represent the bullying pattern in this life and other persecution experiences with the parts of you that experience them allows the trauma to heal and transmute. One example was a facilitant that I worked with who experienced a lengthy, protracted, and very traumatic child custody battle with her ex-husband, in which she was painted as a bad mother and vilified by his lawyer. Even though it eventually resolved with joint custody between them, the experience of the trial was quite traumatic for her, and the PTSD symptoms from it were lingering even a few years later. As we went into the court scenes and connected with the parts of her impacted by it, we could also see and feel that there were other lifetimes of persecution that were bleeding through. There was also a pattern of receiving condemnation, judgment, and betrayals from others, especially in female relationships and friendships. There was specifically a lifetime in which a metasoul aspect of hers had been put on a trial as a witch and then killed for it. The judge in her custody lawsuit was the same soul as in that life, which just recompounded the trauma. As we worked with both the experience from this life and other lifetimes, as well as in the quantum field, through feeling it with the parts of her and metas, she was able to heal this trauma in such a way as to move forward in a healthier way toward offering her soul work without fear of more persecution, set healthy boundaries in non-resonant relationships, and draw more nourishing ones. She has also been able to navigate a forgiving, limited yet goodwill-based ground with her ex-husband in order to raise their children in a civil way that wouldn't feel possible if she hadn't felt the persecution wound from both levels. Persecution trauma can feel so deep and unreachable, yet it can be accessed as we open up to the experience on the local and quantum levels, as we bring love and trust into the parts that need it and the bigger picture of why these experiences have happened to us. There are new openings to self-expression, service, self-acceptance, and self-love. Perpetrator, abuser, narcissists. Being the perpetrator and the abuser can be a challenging role to take on and a difficult choice for a soul to make. I admit that I have much more experience working with souls who are the receivers of abuse than those who choose to perpetrate it as abusers of others. That may be because abusers are often less ready to look at themselves, awaken, and grow beyond the harmful behaviors as they become quite fused in their consciousness to 3D reality. However, being the abuser is still as sacred of a choice as being the abused. One is not better than the other in the heart of the divine. Someone needs to agree to play the opposite polarity, the dark side, be the creator, if you will, of the experiences that cause trauma in order for them to heal on personal and collective levels. Understanding the abuser comes as we understand more deeply our inner abuser or inner punisher. As we begin to feel compassion for our inner punisher and understand why they harm us as a form of self-protection, we can also gain more access to feeling compassion and forgiveness toward our abusers and perpetrators. We can emphasize and empathize with the self-hatred, low self-esteem, and disconnection from the divine that they feel as they act out in these ways that harm others yet also harm themselves. We cannot harm others without also harming ourselves in some way. So abusers are often in acute and unfelt pain and trauma. There can be a deep wound in the souls of those who have chosen to be abusers, especially if it is in many lifetimes as a pattern play out. The feeling of being unforgivable and sinful can run very deep for them, which just vibrates the original divine separation wound in an ongoing way. Abusers tend to medicate, numb, and disassociate from their feelings and empathic abilities. It's not that they don't have the capacity to feel themselves and others, it's that it is too painful to do so. If they could consciously feel empathy, they wouldn't be able to fulfill their roles as abusers. As ascension continues, these souls will no longer need to hold the opposite polarity of abuse. They will be able to move more into balance, opening up their empathic feeling capacity again, feeling the divine embrace them with love, and receive a sense of being forgiven that will complete the cycles of lashing out and abusing others. To see and feel the role that abusers play in the divine experiment of polarity can help to create a bridge toward them, feeling that all of them have a core innocence, purity, and divine essence within them. The other challenging role is that of a narcissist holding the opposite polarity in relationship with empaths. Again, I have more experience in feeling and working with the empaths in these situations, yet in helping them recover and move on, I have felt much about the choice to be narcissistic and in my own experiences with them as well. This differentiation and definition of narcissism is a modern one, and yet the expression of it, again, often comes from many lifetime patterns of being one. In Greek mythology, Narcissus was a hunter that found himself to be so beautiful that he became fixated by his own reflection in a pool. Such was his fixation that he lost the will to do anything else, and he died as a result. The story of him has inspired the naming of certain behaviors as narcissism. Narcissism is not all that someone is, but rather has become a pattern or energy that they have fused to at a deep level, fueled by metasoul aspects who are also acting this way. The behaviors of narcissism are lack of empathy, being a conversation and energy hog, an inflated sense of self-importance, false image projection toward others, rule breaking, being exceptional or above the rules, striving for perfection, charming and then changing into bored and no longer interested, being manipulative, controlling, and not taking responsibility and instead blaming others. Interestingly, narcissists often draw themselves into leadership positions where these kinds of behaviors are tolerated by others or even appreciated to a large extent. I have a great deal of compassion toward those who have a part of them who is narcissistic. It can be very difficult for them to see themselves and become aware of themselves in a realistic way that can affect personal change and transformation. They're often too caught up in the web of their own self-deception to see themselves clearly. This can be difficult for empaths to understand, as they are usually overly self-conscious and hyper-aware of themselves and their impact on others. There's a balance offered here as the two polarities come together to heal and find a middle ground. Narcissism feels like a polarity ground that will no longer be needed as we move further into ascension phases. It's a result of 3D polarity experience where leadership with more charm than compassion has been necessary to keep the experiment running. Suppressing empathy response becomes more difficult as the higher frequency energies open up your higher heart chakra. As the divine feminine arises, the wounded masculine expression of narcissism in both men and women transmutes under the energy of forgiveness and compassion. Wounded masculine and feminine in the masculine or feminine differentiation. Over a period of years, I began to notice a pattern in what the metasoul was choosing to experience related to gender choices. I have discovered that our metasoul can choose to be male or female in any given lifetime, yet there's usually a pattern that revolves around the frequency and amount of choice related to one gender. This choice, like all of those made on the higher self level before incarnation into the physical body, into a particular timeline, are connected to what offers the most opportunity for growth. These choices are also based on what your particular metasoul has agreed on to help heal in terms of soul and archetypal themes for the collective. I've identified that there seems to be 4 main tracks or paths that a metasoul takes in choosing gender expression as a pattern to explore, and also wound and trauma experience. The wound and trauma experience are sort of baked in the cake based on what other metasoul aspects are experiencing already. This is also about what you feel may be true in your experience within this lifetime specifically, as it may be an exception to the usual cycle of your soul's choice. These distinctions are being offered in an overly generalized way, so do feel into how you may feel this personally, specifically, and only if it is helpful for you. As you read these below, you may recognize yourself in one of these. It can be helpful to direct and orient your healing process with this overall pattern in mind. Wounded masculine in the masculine body. This is a soul who is chosen to most often incarnate into a male body. They move into the masculine body in order to experience wounds that are most typical and resonant with the male experience. They are usually strongly connected to the energies of Divine Father and ascended teachers such as Yeshua and Buddha. These souls are helping to heal the patriarchal expression in their metasoul and in the collective. Their wounding usually relates to being stuck in the role of the provider in a way that may limit their growth expression. They may consciously be in the process of rejecting the patriarchy, especially if they had a difficult relationship with their birth fathers. In this case, the king essence inside of them has more difficulty to express and can get stuck in nice guy or good guy mode. They may also suppress their feminine side or aspects rather than have more of a balance of masculine and feminine energies. They can also draw brotherhood wounding experiences with other men in friendships and in sibling relationships. The wounded masculine in the feminine body. This is a soul who is chosen mostly to be masculine in many lifetimes, yet in this lifetime at least is trying on being in a female body. This is often the case for a woman who feels more masculine, who struggles to embrace her femininity and who relates more to the masculine gender overall. The struggles for these souls can be around overly focusing on doing rather than being, too much masculine protection and mental orientation to life, feeling out of place as well as rejection of their feminine body and femininity, and missing templates and modeling for how to deal with this. There are often many lifetimes of being a man and experiencing masculine wounding to be healed and felt here, so that the newer energies of being a woman can arise to blend with the more familiar masculine expression. Sometimes the expression of this can also include sexuality and can influence the tendency toward being attracted to women and to express in a more masculine way sexually with women. Wounded feminine in the feminine body. This is a metasoul who has predominantly been a woman in most, if not all, of her lifetimes. She is choosing to experience the full range of experience from this choice, and particularly related to healing the wounded feminine suppression by the wounded masculine patriarchy. Her struggles are around sexuality issues and blending her desires with her expression in an embodied way. She may also have persecution wounding that runs very deep in her soul, creating challenges to move into her leadership expression. She also may have challenges to trust the masculine and be in intimacy with them, both inside herself and in relationships. The wounded feminine often relates to being the victim of the wounded masculine in all the ways that that can show up, including inside of her own being, from one part of her to the next. The wounded masculine may even be dominant in her energy and expression, even with so much experience of being in a woman's body. Connecting with her inner masculine, learning to love and integrate those masculine energies can help her to let in more intimacy inside and with men in relationships. Wounded feminine in the masculine body. This is a soul who is chosen mostly to be a woman in many lifetimes, yet in this lifetime at least, is trying on being in a male body. This may be the case for a man who feels more feminine and sensitive, who struggles to embrace their masculinity, and who relates much more to the feminine gender overall. The struggles for these souls can be around difficulties to fit in with other men as brothers, or in that energy of male bonding. He may feel a conscious rejection of the patriarchal picture template of masculinity, leaving them feeling lost and confused about how to be a man. He may feel out of place and rejection, foreignness in relation to his male body. There are often many lifetimes of being a woman and experiencing feminine wounding, persecution by the wounded masculine to be healed and felt here, so that the new energies of being a man can arise to blend with the more familiar feminine expression. Sometimes the expression of this can also include sexuality and can influence the tendency toward being attracted to men and to express in a more feminine way sexually with men. Wounded healer. The wounded healer exists in those of us that have chosen to experience traumatic experiences and heal from them in order to serve others in their own process of healing. The wounded healer holds experiences from this life and end of the metasoul related to being a healer and offering healing to others. This is often a very mixed experience of possible adulation on one hand and persecution on the other, especially as connected to 3D-based lifetimes. Many expressions as a healer were suppressed and perceived as threatening by the 3D, 4D matrix program system. Healers are like a good kind of virus that can bring down, infiltrate, and disrupt the entire system. This experience of being suppressed, invalidated, and judged as crazy as a healer are held in the lower 4D matrix archetypal energies. Healers can be unknowingly affected and influenced by these energies. There can be a pattern of hiding and suppression of soul gifts due to these energies that remain undigested in the individual metasoul as well. This suppression leads to suffering, sense of being lost, flat, meaningless sense about life, and unhappiness. The healer is not ultimately in joy and love flow unless they are serving others in some capacity. There can also be lingering feelings of unworthiness and inadequacy created by this suppression that blocks the healer from sharing about their services and from offering them to others. The expression of this service of love as a healer is specific to each person and their soul. Some can offer healing even in 3D jobs and occupations, so it's not expressed necessarily just in the form of being a spiritual teacher, energy or emotional healer, a life coach, or a spiritual author. Some souls are drawn to assist Gaia in her ascension process through being behind-the-scenes grid activators, or to work in the 4D astral plane as light workers and galactic ambassadors. Working with people specifically in a healing capacity to activate their healing is most common, yet not the only expression of it. For those who are actually able to express and serve others, there's then the question of where their flow of service is coming from. Are they serving from overflow that comes from experiencing nourishment in all areas of their lives? Or is the service a compensation to some degree for a lack of something in their lives? Many healers can be compartmentalized in that they are suffering and in pain in other areas of their lives, such as in relationships, yet are projecting an image of being healed and whole when they hold space for others. This is lacking in integrity to the degree that part of them may be pretending to be healed, yet they still are in suffering cycles in other areas of life. The new paradigm for a healer is about experiencing a love ground in all areas of their life and then serving others from that place of overflow, especially as they realize that they serve most by who they are rather than by what they do or say. Otherwise, they can be using service as compensation for a lack or a scarcity in their lives. Many healers are realizing, as the ascension cycle deepens, that they're needing to go within to heal traumas and wounds from this life and other lifetimes as the most integrous means of service. This may necessitate taking a break or space from working with others until they feel more in alignment and in overflow. What can often be bypassed or transcended for healers is the deeper work of healing traumas in the emotional body and in the soul field. Going into dark nights of the soul and shadow work, crisis points, and re-emerging out from them actually ends up qualifying someone to be a space holder for others as they learn and grow from the experience. Serving others can be a mirror for the need for this deeper work as the clients or facilitants reflect the next places to go. Some healers and their gatekeepers may ignore this mirror and instead settle into a persona that fits more with the old paradigm of false god 4D matrix energies. This is a writing I did about the new paradigm of being a healer, as I have felt it arising in myself and is offered by the Divine Mother. After working with people for over 15 years, I now feel how we cannot actually heal another person. We can't do the inner work for them. We can't fix or solve or even really know what their highest path is. We can commit with presence to provide a bridge for them to their own inner discoveries, yet reading them out and giving them answers is an old paradigm. There's a new paradigm of being a healer that is revealing itself as we move more into 5D new Gaia frequencies. This new paradigm is about doing and being your inner work primarily, so that when you are offering healing frequencies to others, it's because you're in joy, abundance, and goodness in your own life, rather than despite your own unhappiness, pain, or suffering, you serve others to overcome it and to make yourself feel better. You are in overflow and offering your soul gifts from that place of embodied self-love and self-worth. Those who have compartmentalized their service to others by being in a lack of integrity in any way will, as we collectively ascend, no longer draw others to them to serve. Many healing practices and spiritual teaching offerings are struggling to draw people as they are invited to go to this next level of purification within. This, of course, not only applies to individual healers, but also to entire healing paradigms and religions. We're all being invited to integrate all that we are, which is true integrity. The new paradigm offers that as a healer, you are your own healer first, continually going through your own deep dive, shadow integration, exploration, and that is what enables and qualifies you to hold that space for others to do the same. You're a guide and a mirror for their higher self. A mirror, not ever a replacement for someone's own soul wisdom. So many abuses, manipulations, and distortions have come from 3D, lower 4D healers, teachers, and gurus that have been fused to undigested karmic lifetimes of being dominant, all-knowing, claiming to be the embodiment of the divine, while not actually doing the shadow clearing and emotional healing work that allows for an embodied emotional maturity that recognizes everyone as a divine spark. They have been allowed to teach from a place that isn't authentic or representative of how they treat others in their personal life. Many of these abuses are now being exposed as all of it is being purified to return back to true and authentic service of love, which is always a with reality and not an against or over others' reality. You are the healer of your own inner world and the manifester of an outer world that matches that healed state. You're actually the space holder that can provide the digestion of trauma that parts of you from this lifetime and other lifetimes most need. Any healer or teacher that offers you any perspective other than this one is still moving through the lower 4D matrix of fear-based control and undigested abusive power dynamics. You have been in the front, to see before others can, to feel more than others will, to know beyond what is accepted, to bring what is rejected. You've been the brunt of the jokes, the object of bully scorn, the black sheep of the family, the alien who doesn't fit in. This has been your soul's choice to be one of the seers, the feelers, and the healers of a mostly slumbering humanity. We see you and we support you. We have never left your side through it all. And we will be there in the next phases too, when more souls can resonate with you, more souls can listen to you, more souls will need you to lead the way. You've so long been the lone light in pervasive darkness. Now you will become the lighthouse, helping to bring everyone safely home to the divine shore again, where you have always been anchored. And now the others who are ready will remember this too. Where you were previously separated, you will be reunited from within and with each other. We see you and we support you, and we have never left your side through it all. Love, the divine, your star family, and higher dimensional metasoul aspects.
Epilogue. As I write the completion of this book, I am feeling how this journey cannot really ever be complete in another way. You can finish this book reaching the end of the text I provided here, yet the true and deeper journey is really just beginning. I've offered in this book a presentation of a process that can only somewhat be grokked and understood from a mental perspective. It cannot really be gotten just by reading about it. To really embody the process in a way that leads to the feeling and healing of the false layers of self and soul, to reveal your true divine essence, is to actually experience it. You may have already been moving into deeper experience of the process through doing the guided meditations that I've been sharing, journaling with parts of yourself, and starting to notice and track what is coming up in that access and differentiation. You may be already going in further by joining us for, or planning to join us for, a group call series or in-person group event. And, or you may already be having a free consultation call with a facilitator or beginning one-on-one sessions from there. Now that your mental body has been educated about the process and paradigm, you can feel into if and how to go beyond the place of understanding and into deeper embodiment, if you are feeling drawn to do that and be that. I would offer that if you felt a growing resonance inside of you while reading this book, that there is a deeper draw there that is worth exploring. If you felt and cried tears, if you had other emotional reactions and responses, if you had that yes feeling move through you, if you felt a soul clarity knowing, these are all signs of a resonant connection that is worth exploring. It is in the emotional, visceral, and feeling-based experience of this process that the most healing and transformation can occur. My experience has been over these many years that there is no limit to the depths and levels of transmutation that can happen when engaging in this process of connecting with parts of yourself and soul aspects from a place of risk-taking, open-heartedness, sincerity, and surrender to the divine, all while your sovereignty remains intact. The only limits placed on it would be by the parts of you that are frightened or unsure about going in deeper, which are valid reactions for sure, especially in the beginning. A key message from this book that I want to convey from my heart to yours, from my soul to yours, is that you are truly not alone on this awakening journey, even as it may very often feel like that. As you connect with parts of yourself and soul in deeper ways, and your authentic essence arises, you draw others who are resonant to be in relationship with you in that exploration. Hopefully, the places we've gone in this book have also opened out an awareness for you about the many parts, metasoul aspects, ascended teachers, archangels, star family, and other beings that have been in your world and life all along. It can be amazing to feel how full your room has been, even as it can feel so empty on the 3D level sometimes to parts of you. Your support team is just waiting to be discovered and embraced by you and you by them. Separation is always an illusion. I've been offered this so many times by various guides, ascended teachers, and metasoul aspects. Parts of us buy into the illusion of separation in order to live out the duality experiment that can then eventually bring them back into oneness. The illusion of separation can lead to so much of our experience of suffering, especially within relationships. Yet ultimately, we are all one, and it was always a temporary choice made by our metasouls to experience a reality different from that oneness in order to return back to it again. And in that returning, we can savor the reunion along the way. The other key message from this book that I hope you've heard, received, and felt is that your essence is infinite love in sacredly human form. Any other sense you've had of yourself from birth family, templating, and social experiences, any other parts that may have been dominant in your personality to form a 3D self-image presentation to the world, any other limiting perceptions, beliefs, programs, conditions that offer a feeling sense of less than being infinite love are ultimately an illusion, and one you lovingly agreed to in order to more come to terms with this infinite love that you always were and are now. These have been necessary illusions that parts of you took on, wore, merged with, and bought into in order to fit in and survive 3D life. Yet they are not the truth of your essence as a child of the divine. You can start to remember this and embody this essence as you heal traumas from this life and other lifetimes, access soul gifts, downloads, and activations from other lifetimes, and activate your light body. As you can probably feel from reading this book, we do not see in our process or treat any energies and parts that have bought into the illusions of fear, separation, and low self-worth as being any lesser or invalidate their realities and feelings. We feel, love, and connect to them in complete sincerity, validating the trauma that they experienced from believing these illusions, even as we offer that the source of the trauma came from a place of fear and separation rather than from love. My hope is that this book has been a reminder to you and parts of you about the truth of your infinite love essence and the reality of oneness, which we all come from. My hope is that it also invites you to move beyond the reminder of this and into the actual embodiment of it, which is our birthright to experience as children of the divine. My hope is that it is an activation of a journey into deeper waters within yourself in which you are free to be and express that divine essence. Wherever that flow takes you into whatever magical vistas that opens up. Much love from me, Jelelle Awen.